Remember for a moment the last time you felt truly small. Not the good kind of small, like looking up at an expansive starry sky in awe, but the bad kind. The kind of small you feel in a room full of people who seem to know something you don't. When a comment from a boss, a sideways glance from a stranger, or even just scrolling through a feed makes your chest tighten with a silent question. Where do I stand? This isn't just social anxiety, this is the quiet daily hum of the social hierarchy. It's the invisible ladder we're all placed on, often without our consent. Today, we're not just going to look at that ladder. We're going to dig into why its very existence, a system that's supposed to organise us, might be the source of a deep, unspoken pain in our modern lives. This video is about the profound disadvantages of the pecking order as the source of your burnout, your loneliness, and that nagging feeling that you're running a race where the finish line keeps moving. Part 1. The weight of an invisible architecture. At its core, a social hierarchy is just a structured way of saying who's up and who's down. It's the class system that puts you at the bottom of some political system, some patriarchy or racial hierarchy while you struggle with rent. It's the corporate org chart that makes you need 3 approvals for a simple idea. It's the rigid caste system of history, but also the softer, yet just as real, stratifications based on your age, your gender, the colour of your skin, or even how many followers you have. Some spots on this ladder are ascribed, which means handed to you at birth, a cosmic lottery. Others are achieved, which means you've earned it through sweat, talent, or luck. And we're told this is just how it works. The social hierarchy reduces conflict and provides order. The alpha leads, the beta enforces, the omega follows. Society gets built, but here's the first stunning contradiction. A system meant to reduce conflict is a master at breeding a more insidious kind of conflict, which is the internal one. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Hell is other people." But he wasn't talking about people themselves. He was pointing to the agonizing experience of being objectified, categorized, and judged by the gaze of others. A social hierarchy institutionalizes that gaze. Philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau once famously noted that man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. Those chains aren't made of iron, they are made of titles, tax brackets, and the staggering weight of expectation. We are told these systems are functional, that they manage resources and prevent chaos. And sure, having a clear chain of command in a hospital or an airplane is great for survival. But when that hierarchy becomes a metric for a human soul's value, it becomes a horrific engine of denigration and shame. Part 2, the psychological tax is your peace of mind. Let's get personal. Why should you care about the social hierarchy? You should care because every single day you pay a psychological tax for living in a ranked world. Think about the constant low-grade anxiety of status comparison. Social media is just the most blatant, in-your-face example of a 24/7 dominance hierarchy. But status comparison also happens at the family dinner, in the office meeting, at the school reunion. This isn't natural competition. It's a relentless pressure to legitimize your place, or better yet, climb the social ladder. This creates what psychologists call status anxiety, a term popularized by philosopher Alain de Botton. It's the haunting fear that we are failing to conform to the idealized successes of our society, that we are, in essence, sliding down the ladder. And here's an eye-opening truth. Hierarchies need you to believe they're legitimate. They are propped up by what sociologists call legitimizing myths. These are stories we tell ourselves to make the inequality seem okay. The wealthy are job creators. Those at the top just work harder. That's just the way it's always been. These stories are powerful. They make the person on the lower rungs think, I deserve this. It internalizes the oppression. It turns the hierarchy from an external structure into an internal critic. That voice that says you're not good enough isn't just your imposter syndrome, it's the echo of the invisible pyramid you live inside. Now you might object, come on, aren't hierarchies natural, necessary? We need leaders, we need structure. Should everyone just be equal in everything? That's a reasonable point. Even a flock of chickens has a pecking order. And in a crisis, we do need clear decision makers. The problem isn't organisation itself, it's the rigid, pervasive and value-assigning nature of our hierarchy. When the hierarchy stops being a tool for getting things done and starts being the definition of human meaning, that's when the poison seeps in. We confuse coordination with valuation. We mistake a person's economic output for their spiritual worth. French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir wrote about how oppression works not just through force, but through making the oppressed complicit in their own oppression. Hierarchies demand this complicity. They require everyone to play their part, to accept the script, to maintain the performance even when it's destroying them inside. American philosopher John Rawls offered a powerful thought experiment. He said, what if, before we were born, we had to design the rules of society from behind a veil of ignorance? not knowing where we'd end up, be it rich or poor, powerful or weak, of a privileged or marginalised group. Would we design the brutally disparate world we now live in? Likely not. We'd build in fairness because we might be the one on the bottom. Our current hierarchies fail this test spectacularly. They are not designed for the benefit of all, but for the benefit of the few at the top. Part 3. The cruel illusion of the merit ladder. The most common defence of our current system is the idea of achieved status. We love the story of the self-made hero who pulls themselves up by their bootstraps, even if they have no boots. It's a wonderful, miraculous narrative, right? It gives us hope. If we just work harder, dream bigger, and sacrifice more sleep, we can ascend. But here is the confounding reality. For millions of people, most people, our status is ascribed. It is handed out at birth based on race, gender, or the zip code of the hospital where you took your first breath. In many parts of history, like the Indian caste system or the rigid aristocracies of old Europe, this was out in the open. Today it's more subtle, but no less profound. Even in supposedly meritocratic systems based on merit, the playing field is never level. That woman in the cubicle? She's competing against nepotism, against the old boys club, against invisible networks of privilege that existed long before she sent her resume. The hierarchy might claim to reward merit, but it's actually rewarding access, connections, and yes, often just blind luck. When we pretend the playing field is level, the people at the bottom don't just feel poor, they feel like failures. They feel misery because the system tells them their lack of status is a reflection of their lack of character. This is a sickening distortion of reality. Statistical data from the World Bank shows that the single greatest predictor of your future wealth is the wealth of your parents. Ascribed statuses, things you're born with, still dictate life outcomes in shameful ways. Access to quality healthcare, education, even clean air and water is stratified. This isn't an accident, it's a feature of the system. Hierarchies manage resource distribution by hoarding. The higher up, the more guarded the gates become. This leads to a staggering waste of human potential. How many geniuses have been lost to poverty? How many healers never got to go to medical school? How many artists are too busy working 3 jobs to ever pick up a brush? Part 4. Why your brain hates being at the bottom. The impact of these hierarchies isn't just a matter of fairness in a political sense. It is a biological reality. When humans perceive themselves as being at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy, our brains trigger a cascade of stress hormones. We enter a state of constant, low-grade anxiety. The omega in a dominance hierarchy isn't just less powerful, they are literally sicker. Research into the social gradient in health shows that people in lower social positions have higher rates of heart disease, shorter life expectancies, and higher levels of cortisol. This is the ghastly truth. The hierarchy impacts our very survival. We are social animals, and for our ancestors, beginning about 10,000 years ago, being low status meant being the last to eat and the most likely to be abandoned. Even though we live in a world of skyscrapers and smartphones, our survivalist brains still view a drop in status as a death sentence. This is why a disgraceful comment from a boss can feel like a physical blow. It's why the fear of being weird in the wrong way keeps us from expressing our true selves. We trade our truth for the safety of a rank. Part 5. The myth of the happy king. You might think, well, the solution is simple, just get to the top. If being at the bottom is sickening, then being the alpha must be sublime, right? But philosophy tells a different story. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, who spent plenty of time around the powerful and the wealthy in Rome, observed that those at the top are often miserable. They live in a state of perpetual paranoia. When your value is tied to your position on a ladder, you are constantly looking down at the people trying to pull you off. The corporate executive who has made it often suffers from a profound loneliness. This is because their relationships are built on power dynamics rather than authentic connections. They can never truly be sure if they are loved for who they are or for what they represent. It's a stupefying cycle of isolation. The hierarchy doesn't just oppress those at the bottom, it hollows out those at the top. We spend money we don't have, to buy things we don't need, to impress people we don't like. It is an unbelievable waste of a human life. Part 6. Addressing the counter-argument. Now, some might argue, and it's a reasonable objection, that we need these structures. Look, they say, without hierarchy, who makes the decisions? How do we organise a city of 10 million people? Total equality is a pipe dream that leads to stagnation. And they have a point. A total lack of structure can lead to a different kind of misery. History has shown that power vacuums are often filled by the most brutal, not the most benevolent. However, the answer isn't to justify horrific inequality. It's to question the legitimization of these hierarchies. There is a massive difference between a functional hierarchy, like a pilot leading a flight crew, and a status hierarchy, where the pilot is seen as a better human than the flight attendant. We can have organisation without dehumanisation. The problem arises when we allow cultural norms to convince us that certain groups are inherently superior. When we start to believe that wealth equals wisdom or that a title equals truth, we have fallen into a trap that is both confusing and dangerous. Part 7. The loss of human connection. The most shameful casualty of social hierarchy is empathy. When we rank people, we stop seeing them as individuals and start seeing them as categories. We see a homeless man, a bureaucrat, or an immigrant, rather than a human consciousness with a complex inner life. This othering is what allows for some of the most heinous and disgraceful chapters in human history. Whether it was the transatlantic slave trade, or the Holocaust, or the rigid class divisions of the Industrial Revolution, hierarchies provided the moral cover for cruelty. When we are separated by vast gulfs of status, we lose the ability to recognize our shared suffering. The person at the top looks down with a sense of misplaced superiority, while the person at the bottom looks up with a sense of envy and resentment. This prevents the very thing that makes life worth living, which is genuine, soulful connections. We are all drifting in the same vast ocean of existence, yet we are too busy comparing the size of our boats to notice that we are all equally vulnerable to the storm. Part 8. Finding meaning outside the rankings. So how do we live in a world that is obsessed with ranking us? How do we find happiness when the system is designed to keep us wanting more? The secret is to realize that the social pyramid is an illusion. Your worth is not a variable, it is a constant. Your reality is not defined by where you sit in an org chart, but by the depth of your awareness and the quality of your love. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the unthinkable horrors of the Holocaust, argued that even in the most rigid and horrific hierarchies imaginable, a human being retains the freedom to choose their attitude. He found meaning not in status, but in purpose and connection. When we stop playing the status game, something phenomenal happens. The anxiety begins to lift, the burnout starts to heal. We begin to see other people not as rivals or obstacles, but as fellow travellers. Part 9. Reclaiming your reality. So what do we do? Tear everything down? Maybe not practically, but we can start with our thinking. The first most radical act is to see the ladder, to recognise its invisible rungs in your daily thoughts. When you feel that pang of inferiority or that flush of superiority, pause and ask, is this my truth or the hierarchy's value system speaking? The second radical act is to practice what we might call horizontal seeing. Look people in the eye, not up or down. Seek connection based on shared humanity, not shared status. Find your meaning in projects, relationships, and creations that exist outside the validation economy. Build what anthropologist David Graeber called everyday communism, which are the small, uncalculated acts of help and care we offer freely, from holding a door open to sharing knowledge, which prove we can relate without a scorecard. This isn't about pretending differences don't exist, it's about refusing to let those differences define human worth. It's about building pockets of your life, including your friendships, your hobbies, your community work, where the hierarchy isn't invited. Build a place where you are not a rank, but a person. The goal isn't to reach the top of a broken game. The goal is to step off the board and remember you were never just a piece to begin with. You are a consciousness capable of awe, love, and creation. No ladder can measure that, no hierarchy can contain it. Your freedom and your happiness don't lie in a higher rank, but in a deeper connection to yourself, to others, and to a reality far more marvellous and complex than any pyramid could ever represent.